We're going to transition next, though, into a story from a survivor. And Liz Alley, who most of you are familiar with in this community, is one of those survivors. And the story of how we kind of came about to her sharing tonight is that she created a new Facebook page and blog because she's working on a book. And as I was reading it, there was something that stood out to me. So I'm going to read you the piece that made me kind of shiver a little bit and reach out to her because I felt like her story would be so important for people to hear. I started to second guess my decision. Did I just leave a controlling husband only to submit to a day manager who had rules? I had no other choice. I was already beaten down by years of abuse and a terrifying departure to run away. Now, I was afraid of what my life would look like, and uncertainty of what the roads ahead would look like for us. I reluctantly accepted and shamefully humbled myself to a daily schedule of chores and ridiculous curfews. I was 40 years old. That's part of her story when she fled to a shelter, which she's about to share more with you. So coming up, we have Liz Alley and then several performances that will also share with you some amazing stories.
Ashley Wilson asked me if I would like to create a video about my experiences as a domestic violence victim and survivor for this year's Art Above Violence fundraiser, and to share a little from my book. I actually asked her if she was kidding. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Over the years, I've been longing to write a book about that time in my life and to share what I did to overcome my obstacles. I knew I had to write a book someday about the 3 months my 3 children and I spent in a battered women's shelter. That was in 1990. I've written on behalf of all victims who have not yet spoken, yet have stories to tell. Our stories are similar, but our lives are different and ever-changing. I believe in our similarities, we have the ability to inspire other victims. I'm excited to say my book is just about complete and ready to go to a publishing editor. I'll be sharing a few paragraphs from my story, but first of all, thank you, Rise Above Violence volunteers, advocates, and staff, and to Ashley, to Nancy and Carmen, who have been dedicated to victims' rights from the beginning. It has been my pleasure to have worked with many of you and to watch your programs and resources for victims grow. If you are a donor, an artist, or know someone who is a victim or a survivor, and you want to help, thank you for your work and for listening. I hope what I'm about to share will assure you how significant your work is as we support families whose lives have been affected by violence. If you are a victim or a survivor, know there is always help for you and how special you are as you navigate your lives. A famous bear stuffed with fluff once said, "You are braver than you believe. You are stronger than you seem. You are smarter than you think, and loved more than you know." The violence started slowly. We had an argument and I was pregnant. I still remember the old 1970s school green maternity top I was wearing and the bathroom door in the hallway he shoved me against. I don't remember the reason why he pushed me, but I still hold that memory of the trauma in every cell in my body. I was stunned and in disbelief. No one had ever pushed me before. I was 18. We had been married a few months. There was a way he stood with his chest pumped out and his finger pounding my chest with a crazed look in his eyes, telling me he could easily kill me with one finger. He said he learned skills like that in Vietnam. Then there was the plate of spaghetti he threw at the wall. He'd tell me I provoked him, and I'd wonder if perhaps I had. I started to justify his blow-ups as a way he expressed his frustration with life in general and me being pregnant, hoping that each episode would be the last. Besides, he had a father who was verbally and emotionally abusive to him and his mother. He enlisted in the Army at 17 to get away from his dad. There were reasons for his anger, and I felt sorry for him. He could be sweet and affectionate most of the time. He wasn't a bad guy, he just had issues. I must be doing something wrong. It must be my fault. If only I was a better wife. It's been 30 years since I left my husband. I still struggle with calling him an abuser, a perpetrator, or a violent man. And I still don't like to think that I was once a victim. A victim is weak. I was a strong and independent woman of the 60s and believed in equality between men and women. Abuse wasn't what I signed up for when I married the person who was to be my protector. I didn't want to label the man I was married to for 19 years and the father of our 6 children as a batterer. It could always be worse, I'd tell myself. The kids need 2 parents. How will I support all of us if I leave? If I leave, he may find me. It took a woman's support group for me to realize I was a victim of domestic violence, and on May 1st, 1990, I left. Now I was a survivor, but my story didn't end there. It was all so secretive, following the advocate in her vehicle to an unknown location in the California mountains. It was as if we were in a witness protection program. No one could know where we were, not even my parents, not even my 2 older sons I had to leave behind with their dad. They were 16 and 13. The shelter didn't allow boys who were 13 and older. They were all in school the morning I planned to leave, except for my 16-year-old son. Did he fake illness to stay home? He must have had an idea something was going to happen. My daughters told me years later that he was outside our bedroom door the night before we left with a baseball bat when their dad was attempting to suffocate me. Their cries stopped him from what I'm certain would have been my last breath. He seemed to understand things beyond his years. He deserved to know what was happening. I explained how his 2 sisters, youngest brother, and I were leaving, but could not tell him where. He said he understood. I asked him to let his brother know what was going on and why they couldn't go. I recently asked my son, who was to be told the reason why he couldn't go with us, if in fact he did know. We were on a mother-son road trip in Utah, and he was driving. I'll never forget the look on his face when he turned his head to look at me, a confused look in his eyes, and slowly said, "No." All these years, he thought I abandoned him. He was now 41. I suppose the enormity of responsibilities I left that morning with his older brother were too much to bear, and he forgot that one small detail. I don't remember anything about the surreal drive up the mountain to the battered women's shelter, other than the change in scenery as we climbed in elevation. It took 45 minutes. Weren't the children speaking? Weren't they doing their usual bantering and annoying each other like on a normal car ride? The oldest was in the front, 2 in the back. Didn't they even ask me where we were going? Or were they just as traumatized as I was and unable to sort through it all? I only remember my thoughts bouncing back and forth between relief that I escaped and anxiety about what was to come. What did they think about as they drove up that mountain to a house they had never been to before? They left their dad and older brothers, their bedrooms, their schools, their friends, and their dog Cookie. It was late afternoon when we pulled in. The house wasn't bad. It was 2-story with pale yellow siding and in a nice neighborhood. Like many neighborhoods in the mountains, easy to get turned around until you knew your way. A perfect location if an angry husband tried to find it. I was mentally and physically exhausted. The adrenaline and stress in my body from leaving in such a hurry was winding down, but my hyper-vigilant state of mind was still in high gear. Much like PTSD, symptoms of being in what was often a war zone don't disappear overnight. How strange it was to watch the advocate unlock the front door in broad daylight with people inside. We sloughed our big trash bags full of clothes past several women in the living room and into what would be our bedroom. There were 6 sets of bunk beds. We were assigned 2 sets, the others taken by other women and their children. The bedroom window faced the front yard with a view of the Ponderosa Pines, a view I would stare at during my quiet time for 3 long months. 3 months was the longest a woman could stay. I already missed my home, my furniture, the rest of my belongings, my yard, my garden. My daily routine, even if it was far from perfect, was normal. This was not. The kids began to sob, and in between sobs said they missed their dad They asked when they could see him again and why were we here. I did my classes in counseling and got my shit together. I worked the program. I was saving money from my welfare cash assistance and found a job at a yogurt shop. Shelter residents were required to find employment before they left. Then I found a rental house, and on August 1st, exactly 3 months later, we were free to leave and I would soon get my other sons. A few weeks later, the shelter day manager came with me to court. She walked and talked like she meant business. Her presence gave me a sense of protection. I was trying to be strong, but inside I was a mess. She, who laid down the law to a bunch of confused, emotionally drained, and physically exhausted victims, was my greatest advocate. She sat with me for moral support while my husband and I went before a judge to discuss parental rights. I no longer had a secret hiding place, and he would now know where we lived. It was time to put a protective order in place. The 16 and 13-year-olds spoke with a family mediator to determine who would live with their dad and who would live with me. Being a mom can be tough. Being a mom in a domestic violence relationship is a nightmare, except it's not a dream, it's reality. I was one of the lucky ones. My husband accepted what was to be and never bothered me again. I was finally safe and free from violence. So, to those of you watching, please know when all is said and done, a domestic violence survivor is alone and quite often a single parent for the very first time. Many are reluctant to ask for help. We continue to be ashamed of our past and struggle to come to grips with our new lives. Grateful to have a fresh start, but not sure where to begin. Maybe you are still a victim or are a survivor. Ask for help. Set little goals. Be proud of the steps you take. Realize you will have many different feelings as you move forward. All of your accomplishments are to be commended. You are or have been in a battle for your very existence. You've been strategic with every detail of your life under the worst circumstances and doing the best you can. You are a hero every moment. You are a survivor every day.